If you don't have a leaf blower, you might consider getting one. They're really handy to have around the house and of course the shop. But just remember, if you do get one, you'll have to deal with the problems that come along with them. And unfortunately, this one has a lot more problems than your average leaf blower. Luckily, most all the problems are due to age or lack of maintenance, but fixing them on this blower will not be easy. In today's video, we're going to be looking at this very popular shade of orange leaf blower. And the problem is that I was told by the owner that it needs repairs, but they weren't more specific than that. Let's just be honest, most two-stroke equipment I find simply won't start or run correctly, and this one falls in that category. The first thing I'm going to do is take a look around the machine and see if there's anything alarming. We're looking for fuel or oil leaks, breaks in the body, or anything that's not supposed to be there. Now you might think that we're wasting our time, but you'd be surprised by what you might find. So there is fuel in the tank, which is great news because we'll be able to inspect it as well. We're not too concerned about how fresh the fuel is, instead we're more interested in the amount of oil that was mixed in it. Not enough oil will burn up the engine, while too much oil will foul the spark plug with carbon. We won't pour it out just yet because I do want to try and start it and see how it's running. The first item that needs attention is a very discolored purge bulb, but we'll take care of that when we deal with the carb. But until then, we'll prime the carb with our own fuel and then try and start it. Now surprisingly, it ran for a lot longer than I expected, but it didn't stay running long enough to do any kind of real work. And one of the possible reasons for that could be the fuel that's inside the tank. So it's tough to tell, but the gasoline portion is fresh, and believe it or not, I do believe there is two-stroke oil in it. Depending on what kind of oil you add to the gasoline, the final color will differ from other brands. So while trying to fish out the fuel filter, we find our first real problem, and that is there is no fuel filter. Think about it, the manufacturers put the fuel filters in the fuel tanks for a reason. That probably means it's important to the fuel system. And over a long period of time, the fuel filter might become clogged and replacing it might be a good idea. Now I know this blower didn't look that dirty, but there were places that were collecting dirt and oil that I wanted to take care of before working on it. Now you can either wait for the water to evaporate by leaving it in the sunlight, or you can use compressed air if you're really short on time. Now because the fuel filter came off the fuel line, we'll need to inspect the lines and more than likely replace them. We might as well inspect the carb at the same time to ensure it's in working condition too. So this is when things get a bit difficult. Taking the carb off the engine requires disconnecting the throttle linkage, and to have the clearance, the front housing needs to come off. So it sounds like a lot of work, but they did design it to be more convenient to take apart than other brands. Just be aware that the cover for the muffler is held in place by the housing and needs to be installed at the same time. And before disconnecting any fuel lines, take a good look at how they're ran. That way you can put them back on the same way. Now that is assuming that the lines were ran correctly to begin with. I do have to let you know that I've received a couple of these from customers who ran their own lines incorrectly. But since these lines look to be well aged, there's a good chance they were the original ones from the factory. So it's painfully obvious that these lines are old and brittle and will need to be replaced. That means we'll need to get rid of the old lines, but this isn't going to be an easy replacement. The reason why is because this system has a separate purge bulb from the carb, which means it's a bit more complex than other systems. So after taking out the old fuel lines from the tank, these plastic splices were used to pass through the fuel tank grommet. So I've never liked using these, and I've always felt that they were used to help speed up the manufacturing process. And since we have the time, I won't be using them and instead allowing the fuel line to pass through the grommet as one whole piece. Now you are welcome to use them, that is your choice, but you will need to take out the grommet to do that. But doing it the way I am, you won't need to take out the grommet, you just need to push the line through the openings, which is a lot easier. You just need to decide which one will be the fuel filter line and which one will be the return line. It doesn't matter which is which, but I've decided to make the one on the left the filter line, which just means it's longer. And after fishing out the longer filter line, we'll then cut off the angle piece and install the new fuel filter. Now these are not that expensive, but just be aware that there are many different styles to choose from. Also, when pushing the fuel filter back into the fuel tank, make sure it's at the very bottom of the tank. This will help to ensure that it'll be able to pick up all the fuel inside it. Next, we'll cut the fuel line to the appropriate length, but we can't connect it just yet because we still need to go through the carb. Now don't throw away that short fuel line either, because we can use it to cut our new line with it. It's okay for it to be too long, but making it too short will make our job a lot harder. So I'm going to do something a bit different, and that is not take the carb off the engine, at least not yet. Instead, I want to inspect the metering diaphragm first and replace it if it needs it. Now the mistake I made was forgetting that the inlet screen on the other side of the carb might be clogged because of the fuel filter was missing for who knows how long. And as you just heard, this metering diaphragm is extra crispy, and although that's how I like my chicken, these diaphragms need to be the exact opposite. So you can try and save these old diaphragms by dropping them into a rejuvenation bath for a couple of days. So I haven't had to use any of these yet, as I keep a stock of the 4 most used diaphragms in my tool bag. So I buy these in bulk, which makes them very inexpensive, so I'd recommend doing the same thing even if it's just a 3-pack. Now what you do with the other 2 diaphragms is up to you, but I would just keep them for the next time you need them. So what would I do if I had opened the carb and it was really bad inside it? So I would still try cleaning it, but there's now the possibility of having to buy a new carb. Next, we'll start connecting the fuel lines, starting with the fuel filter line going to the brass port on the right side of the carb. Then we'll connect that extra fuel line to the port on the left side. Oh, I almost forgot, we need to remove the old purge bulb before we can connect the lines to it. Now to release the bulb, all you have to do is press on the tabs on either side and it should come loose. But if you're really crafty, you can take these apart and replace just the bulb. However, you still have to source a replacement, and if you go that far, you might as well just buy the whole thing. And after pushing the bulb into the housing, we can now finish connecting the rest of the fuel lines. So the fuel return line will connect to the long port on the back of the bulb. That of course means the extra fuel line from the left side of the carb will connect to the short port. I know it's basically one extra fuel line, but it seems to be enough to be confusing if you didn't take notes ahead of time. Now while doing the editing, I realized that I probably should not have installed the filter base until after our flow test. The reason why is because with it out of the way, it would have made it a lot easier to see the flow. Next, we'll put some fuel into the tank and then see if the fuel flows through the lines like it's supposed to. So when pressing on the purge bulb, fuel will come up the filter line. Then enter the carb, come up the extra fuel line, fill the bulb, and then leave the bulb and return back to the fuel tank. And as you can see, fuel is flowing through the system just like it's supposed to. Now if yours is not doing this, then there could be a problem with the carb or possibly the fuel filter. I'm also going to check the spark arrestor screen in the muffler for a clog. If this screen is covered in carbon, it'll cause the engine not to be able to get to full speed. However, that won't happen here with this one because this screen is completely clear of any carbon. But if yours is covered in carbon, then you can use heat or some other strong chemicals to clean it off. Also, if your screen is covered in carbon, you might want to take the muffler off to inspect the exhaust port. The port might start to close off around the edges, and if this does happen, will greatly affect how the engine runs. And the last thing we need to do is start to put the blower back together so that we can test it. Also, if your air filter is dirty or wet with fuel, you might want to consider getting a new one. But if you need more than just the filter, you might want to consider an entire tune-up kit instead. So I have to say this blower sounds really good. Most times when I get them, they sound really worn out, but not this one. So I didn't get a chance to ask the previous owner why they were getting rid of it, but I'm just happy it turned out great. Now we did need to lower the idle speed just a bit, but the carb could have easily required a lot more tuning, so we got lucky. So I don't mind this brand of blowers at all. In fact, this would be my brand of choice if I didn't already have a preferred brand. However, I wouldn't have a problem recommending this brand to anyone. But no matter which brand you pick, I would always tell you to follow the off-season maintenance in the owner's manual. And if you do, you shouldn't have any problems for a really long time. So my question is, what's your brand of choice when it comes to blowers? Now, I would like to tell you what mine is, but I don't want my choice to affect yours. Thank you for watching. I really do appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions about this project or about your own projects, and I hope to see you in the next video.